This is the VOA Special English Education Report. 826 is the name of a nonprofit organization that works to help students become better writers by thinking creatively. 826 is also the address of the first center where this literary arts program began in 2002. Author Dave Edgars and educator Nineveh Caligari started the program in California at 826 Valencia Street in San Francisco. It now serves 30,000 students through writing and tutoring centers in 8 American cities. At the front of 826 Valencia is a pirate supply store. Think of the kind of place where Captain Jack Sparrow might shop. Lee Lehman is the executive director. She says the idea of entering through a pirate store is meant to get students not to think of the place as a school or tutoring center. During the day, teachers bring classes on field trips, and volunteers help with writing projects. After school, students come for help with creative writing and their schoolwork. The center is for public school students between 6 and 18 years old. 826 Valencia is located in a mostly Latino neighborhood. Ms. Lehman says many of the children are from poor immigrant families. Each 826 center has a different theme, from the pirate store in San Francisco to a store for spies in Chicago. The National Chief Executive, Gerald Richards, says budget cuts in public schools mean less money for arts education. And as that goes away, he says, so does the ability for students to use their imagination. I think there is much more of a focus on science, technology, engineering, and math. There's a lot of focus on testing, and a lot of the teaching that's going on in schools is focusing on the test and passing the test, rather than thinking about how do we get kids to think. Lee Lehman says 826 builds confidence. Students can publish and sell their work at places like the pirate supply store and on the internet. In 2010, the programs across the country published 944 volumes of student writing. Ms. Lehman says students are proud when their writing gets published. One of the students in San Francisco, Sofia Marquez, says, I get to use my imagination. That's why I like writing. You can watch another video about the program in San Francisco at voaspecialenglish.com. You can also find texts, MP3s, and activities to read, listen, and learn English. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Presutti.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report. Each year, 750,000 Americans under the age of 20 become pregnant. The United States has one of the highest rates of teenage pregnancy among Western industrialized countries. New York City has an especially high rate with about 20,000 teen pregnancies each year. Since 1984, the Carrera Adolescent Pregnancy Prevention Program has worked to reduce the birth rate for teens. The program has worked with the Children's Aid Society, which operates after-school activities for young people. The sex education effort starts with children who are 10 and 11 years old. But sex education is only part of the effort. Psychologist Michael Carrera launched the Pregnancy Prevention Program 29 years ago. He says efforts to reduce teen pregnancy rates must help young people see themselves as successful adults. He says success is more likely when young people believe that good things are going to happen in their lives. Then they take steps to reduce the risk of teen pregnancy on their own. The program includes sports training, art classes, part-time jobs, and help with banking. Healthcare is also available, as well as advice on education. Young people in the program have 50% fewer pregnancies than other New York teenagers from similar at-risk backgrounds. Michael Carrera is now in his 70s. He says he is still excited to come to work. His program reaches about 4,000 students in 12 states. The Obama administration has recognized the program with a Social Innovation Award. In 2010, the administration ordered that federal money for sex education only go to programs that are proven to be effective. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report in Special English. A new report says more and more international students are attending colleges and universities in the United States. It also notes a large increase in the number of students from China. These findings are from the latest edition of the Open Doors Report. It is a joint project of the State Department and the Institute of International Education, a nonprofit educational and training organization. The report documents the record number of international students in the United States during the 2011-2012 school year. It says more than 764,000 international students are attending American colleges and universities during the period, a 6% increase from the year before. By comparison, the number of Americans studying overseas increased by 1%. The report says 194,000 students at American colleges and universities were from China. That is an increase of more than 23% over the year before. Peggy Blumenthal is with the Institute of International Education. She says the number of Chinese students is at its highest level ever. Peggy Blumenthal says Chinese students prefer to come to the United States. Chinese students are not the only ones who want to attend American colleges and universities. After China, India sends the second largest number of students to the United States for higher education. India has about 100,000 students in American schools. South Korea is third, with about 72,000 students. Peggy Blumenthal says the advantage of higher education in America is that it is a very big and very diverse system. She says there are over 4,000 universities and colleges in the United States, so there is still a lot of room for international students. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carolyn.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report in Special English. A new study shows that simple, low-cost interventions can help teenage girls in Africa stay in school during their monthly periods. Paul Montgomery of Oxford University in Britain led the study. He said women are a driving force of development across Africa, so it is important, he said, to keep girls in school. 120 girls in Ghana took part in the study. Their average age was 16. They attended 3 secondary schools in urban areas and 1 in a rural area. In the study, girls at 2 of the schools received free sanitary pads and lessons on puberty. Their attendance increased by an average of 6 days during a 65-day school term. The puberty lessons included information about personal care during menstruation. The girls also learned about the biology of their developing bodies and about pregnancy. At the 3rd school, the girls received the lessons, but not the free pads. Attendance by these girls also improved about the same amount over 5 months. At the 4th school, the girls did not receive the pads or the lessons. That group showed no improvement in school attendance. Paul Montgomery says the girls in the study had several reasons for missing school during their monthly bleeding. A majority expressed embarrassment about the changes in their bodies. Paul Montgomery says the interventions might not only keep girls from missing school, but also reduce teen pregnancies. The Public Library of Science published the study in its journal PLOS One. A larger study is taking place in Uganda until 2015. For VOA Learning English, I'm Mario Ritter.
This is the VOA Special English Education Report. President Obama signed legislation in August to provide $26 billion to the states for education and health care. The measure includes $10 billion for education and $16 billion for Medicaid, the joint state-federal government medical program for the poor. The legislation will help 160,000 teachers and 150,000 police and public service workers keep their jobs. The House of Representatives approved the bill August 10th. House members had already begun a 6-week holiday when the Senate approved the measure. Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, took the rare step of calling House lawmakers back to Washington to vote on the bill and send it to President Obama without delay. President Obama has stressed the importance of education for all Americans. He said this is necessary for the country to compete among some of the world's fastest-growing economies. Earlier in the week, the president spoke at the University of Texas. He talked about the decrease in college graduation rates in the United States. He said, "In a single generation, we've fallen from 1st place to 12th place in college graduation rates for young adults. That is unacceptable, but it is not irreversible. We can retake the lead. President Obama said educational success and economic well-being are linked. His goal is to increase the percentage of college graduates from 40% to 60% by the year 2020. The president said the federal government has already reformed the student loan system and increased tax credits for families struggling to pay college education costs. Some Republican lawmakers criticized the new measure. House Republican leader John Boehner dismissed the emergency jobs measure as more wasteful spending aimed at pleasing the Democrats' traditional union allies. Hours before the vote, President Obama told reporters at the White House that education and the safety of communities should not be political issues. He said, "Those interests are widely shared throughout this country. A challenge that affects parents, children, and citizens in almost every community in America should not be a Democratic problem or a Republican problem. It is an American problem." And that's the VOA Special English Education Report.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report. An unusual high school in Texas recently welcomed a special visitor. President Obama visited Manor New Technology High School near the city of Austin. The high school seeks to help prepare students to meet the increasing demand for technology workers. It has gained national recognition for focusing on student projects in so-called STEM subjects: science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Manor New Technology has 332 students. 68% are from ethnic or racial minorities. 52% are from poor families. Across the country, students from poor families are more likely to have low educational levels and leave school. But the Texas school sent 97% of its graduates to college in 2011 and all of its graduates in 2012. Most schools, however, do not have the financial support that Manor New Technology receives. It gets help from private organizations as well as state and federal funding. Technology schools are sometimes criticized for not paying enough attention to the arts and social sciences. But supporters say more money should go into STEM programs that will provide people with jobs. University of Texas professor Jeremy Surrey says workplace success depends on good communication and an ability to work well with others as a team. He says an understanding of cultures is important. For instance, some students at Manor New Technology High School reconstructed early Egyptian tools used to build pyramids. They learned about the engineering involved. But they also studied the social and cultural atmosphere of that time. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Bowman.
I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Education Report. On November 2nd, the United States held congressional and state elections in a year defined by voter dissatisfaction. Democrats tried to excite their party's base of support in an effort to limit Republican gains. That base includes young people. 2 years ago, 2/3 of voters under 30 voted for Barack Obama. The president urged them to remember that excitement and his campaign for change. His efforts to reach young voters included appearances on MTV and The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, along with college visits. The president spoke to about 35,000 people at Ohio State University. He said, "And now we are not just advocating change. We're not just calling for change. We're doing the hard work of change. We're grinding it out. Sometimes it's frustrating. We're delivering change inch by inch, day by day. It's not easy. Believe me, I know it's not easy." Zach Howell, president of the College Republican National Committee, could have said the same thing 2 years ago. But he said this year was completely different. He said more young people are proudly identifying themselves as conservatives and as Republicans. He said, "It is all about the economy. That is everything to them. I mean, 20% of college graduates are unable to find work right now. So young people are concerned about their futures." 60% of college students approved of the job President Obama was doing in May of last year. That number was down to 44% in an Associated Press MTVU survey in October. Heather Smith is executive director of Rock the Vote. Her group tries to get young people to become politically active. She says schools need to provide more civics education, and states need to continue their efforts to make voting easier. More and more Americans vote early. Some states even let people register and vote on the same day. But Ms. Smith says the voter registration process may be one reason why young people are less likely to vote. But getting more people, especially young people, to vote is harder in years without a presidential election. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. Join us online at voaspecialenglish.com and on Facebook and Twitter at VOA Learning English.
This is the VOA Special English Education Report. President Obama sent Congress a proposal in March to rewrite the main federal education law. The current version of the law, signed by George W. Bush 8 years ago, is known as the No Child Left Behind Act. That name would go away. The current policy calls for every student to be able to pass state tests in reading and math by 2014. All schools must show yearly progress toward this goal. But states decide how much students need to know to show proficiency. President Obama's goal is that every student should graduate from high school ready for college and a career. The target date for schools is 2020. The President described the plan in one of his weekly radio and internet addresses. The President said, "What this plan recognizes is that while the federal government can play a leading role in encouraging the reforms and high standards we need, the impetus for that change will come from states and from local schools and school districts." Under the new proposal, states and school systems would compete for federal grants. The idea is similar to the administration's $4 billion race to the top competition to reform schools. Struggling schools could receive money for teacher improvement and for developing plans for success. The lowest performing schools would face changes, such as replacing teachers and the principal, or being closed. The administration sent its general ideas to Congress in what it called a blueprint for reform to develop the next education law. Ann Bryant is executive director of the National School Boards Association. Her group worked with the Department of Education on the plan. She says it is a good start, but still needs work. The plan would reward effective schools and teachers with money and other recognition. But leaders of the nation's largest teachers' unions criticize the administration's blueprint. Dennis Van Rokel of the National Education Association said it still relies on standardized tests to identify winners and losers. He also expressed disappointment that states would have to compete for money. Randy Weingarten of the American Federation of Teachers said the plan appears to place all the responsibility on teachers, but gives them 0% authority. And that's the VOA Special English Education Report. For more programs, go to voaspecialenglish.com.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report in Special English. A Vietnamese man hopes to raise the quality of education in his country by building parent libraries in rural schools. Nguyen Nguyen Thach provides libraries to the schools so books are more available in farming communities. He works with publishers in Hanoi to get the books at reduced rates for teachers and their students. By talking with farmers, workers, and students, Mr. Thach discovered most schools have enough textbooks, but many poor families have few books at home and do not visit school libraries. More than 90% of Vietnam's population can read and write, but academic performance in the schools remains low compared to other Southeast Asian nations. Corruption is a big part of the problem. Vietnamese media often report stories of teachers giving high grades in exchange for money. Some experts criticize teaching methods that depend heavily on dictation. They say asking students to repeat everything a teacher says to the class harms their ability to think for themselves. Nguyen Nguyen Thach says he wants people to invest money in books for a better future. To date, Almost 1,000 parent libraries have been built in Tai Ben province. Hundreds of books are in each one. Several other provinces have copied this model. For each school, Mr. Tak helps build libraries for up to 4 classes. Others then follow his example. The head of the Anduk Secondary School says Mr. Tak's work has improved the quality of education. She thinks Mr. Tak's example helps students think more creatively, or, to put it in an American expression, outside the box. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carolyn.
I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Education Report. Next year, the Peace Corps will celebrate its 50th anniversary. Peace Corps volunteers are Americans who teach and work on projects in developing countries. The United States created the Peace Corps during the Cold War with the Soviet Union. Today, technology has changed how the volunteers do their work and stay connected with friends and family back home. In the early 1980s, Gordy Mengel served in Zaire, now the Democratic Republic of Congo. Letters from home would take weeks or months. As a result, he socialized more with people in the local community. He lost contact with friends and family back in the States. Today, Gordy Mengel is a Peace Corps programming and training officer in Rwanda. He says these days are different because of the internet and cell phone service. When volunteers go back to their homes in villages, they can get on Skype, or they give a quick call to mom and dad back at home. Sonia Morhanj is one of about 100 Peace Corps volunteers in Rwanda. She talks with a friend in California on Skype, an internet calling service. She talks with her mother on the phone and emails her father. She says, "I can't imagine having been a Peace Corps volunteer in the 70s or the 80s or even the early 90s. I'm just so used to everyone having a cell phone that works internationally. I'm very, very lucky in the fact that where I live, I have wireless internet, and that makes it a lot easier." Peace Corps volunteers receive a living allowance and other benefits in return for 27 months of training and service. John Reddy is the country director in Rwanda. He says fairly easy access to the internet means that volunteers can do more than just call home. They can research subjects to help their communities. And through the Peace Corps Partnership Program, they can get donations online for their projects. But John Reddy admits he sometimes misses the old days, before the internet and good phone service. He says volunteers had more independence then. You can comment on this story and find other education reports online at voaspecialenglish.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and iTunes at VOA Learning English. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal.